guests for you here on The Big Stories. We begin right now with new steps, though, in this insurrection probe. Bannon on trial for hiding evidence from this committee, while an aide to indicted Trump advisor Peter Navarro is breaking with the Navarro-Bannon approach and is cooperating and testifying today to the committee as it readies its final primetime hearing, featuring a rarity in the Trump administration: people who actually quit in protest over his actions. Americans will hear directly from Trump spokesperson Sarah Matthews at the Thursday hearing. She quit on the day of January 6, reiterating support for a peaceful transfer of power. Another witness slated to speak out, high-ranking Deputy National Security Advisor Matthew Pottinger, who had the same concern. And while, as we've discussed, most Trump aides just quietly served till the last day he had in office and then later offered these tardy self-serving accounts only when compelled by subpoena, we should note the committee will be choosing to end its presentation here to the public with these counterexamples. Pottinger has described his disgust at how in the middle of the violence, Trump not only failed to protect Congress, but doubled down on the vigilantism that put Mike Pence in danger.
One of my staff brought me a printout of a tweet by the president. And the tweet said something to the effect that Mike Pence, the vice president, didn't have the courage to do what should have been done. I read that tweet and made a decision at that moment to resign. That's where I knew that I was leaving that day, once I read that tweet.
Once read that tweet, which you see here was sent out. Here's what exactly was going down when that tweet was sent out. You can see on the other side of the screen. And that's why this witness left, didn't wait another 2 weeks, didn't wait for subpoenas either. The testimony also shows that Trump was informed of the violence, quote, before that very tweet attacking Pence. So Trump knew of the violence, just like he knew the marchers were armed, just like he knew the whole point was to threaten or hurt or even kill lawmakers in order to overthrow that election that he knew he lost. It was the point, not an accident, according to the committee evidence and what we're hearing from investigators who say this final hearing will show that Trump not only knew of all that violence, but that he liked it.
This is going to open people's eyes in a big way. The reality is, I'll give you this preview, the president didn't do very much, but gleefully watched television during this time frame.
And as he watched, he was gleeful about the violence. You can consider it Donald Trump's Eminem moment, inciting his supporters, basically saying, hey, do you like violence? Want to copy me and do exactly as I did? And investigators say Trump liked it, plotted it, and got everyone to copy it, which is why they say he should be held responsible. Let's get into it now. I'm joined by former Obama Acting Solicitor General Neil Katyal and a former Obama campaign official, Che Komanduri. Welcome to you both. Che, your view of the Eminem of it all, the evidence, the testimony from Trump's own people who were around him saying he liked the violence, which, as Eminem told us, and as so many people reacted then just as content, not as reality, it's bad if you're someone who's gleefully liking violence.
Absolutely. And I think that the narrative that the committee's going to lay out tonight is sort of the Nero fiddles while Rome burns narrative of January 6th, that Donald Trump sort of looked on gleefully while this was all occurring and was fully enjoying it, endorsing it, and saw that the benefit to him that could result from it. And we should be reminded, by the way, that Nero fell because the Roman Senate declared him a public enemy of the state. So the Imperial Romans 2,000 years ago had far higher ethical standards than Mitch McConnell and the current U.S. senators and the GOP do. So I think that this is a very strong argument. It's one I remember during the second impeachment. Fox News had legal analysts like Andrew McCarthy who said, oh, if only these impeachment managers had dereliction of duty as their sort of main focus, that would be something to get Trump on. But we don't like the case that they're presenting now, so Trump should be let free. So I do think that the committee has now answered that criticism and is going to bring forward those arguments.
Make Rome great again is the vibe I'm getting from you, Che.
Right.
And as you say, it's a low bar. And Neil, I mention all of that with regard to ethical accountability, which is distinct from the legal requirements, which we'll get to later. But I'm curious, as someone who's also told stories in court, what you think about this aspect of the story and that the committee is ending on it.
Yeah, I think it actually picks up a different Eminem song, Lose Yourself. I mean, basically the narrative that Trump is telling, that they're saying about Trump is he had one chance, he couldn't let it go, and he was willing to do anything in his power to try and keep the reins of power despite the election. And I think what's so significant, Ari, about these two witnesses coming forth in the next hearing, Matthews and Pottinger, is that these are true Trump people. I mean, Pottinger spent all 4 years in the Trump White House, so he's not some deep stater or anything like that. He's as Trump as it gets. And yet both of them, when they saw what was unfolding on January 6th, resigned right away. So this isn't something in which like people in hindsight look at and say, oh, we should have known about the risk of violence. They were in real time watching it. They saw Trump's tweet on 2:24 p.m. and Pottinger, as you just showed a moment ago, decided to resign right then. Trump knew what was going on. He did nothing. He sat on his hands. If anything, it looks like he was gleeful. This is both a story for kind of his legacy, but it's also a story that will hold up in court if it comes to a federal indictment, as I believe it should.
As for Ms. Matthews, because of the nature of these investigations, they have these deposition-style interviews, Che. Here's what we've heard from her previously.
He had the door of the Oval open to the Rose Garden because you could hear the crowd already assembled outside on the ellipse, and they were playing music, and it was so loud that you could feel it shaking in the Oval. He was in a very good mood, and I say that because he had not been in a good mood for weeks leading up to that, and then it seemed like he was in a fantastic mood that evening.
Che, you can hear almost the second nature of people accustomed to serving that particular president. Everything was emotional. We could call him histrionic. We could call him unhinged, as some of his aides did. It was this whole emotion. But it seems that in this audience that they're going to have in the primetime hearing, they want to close by showing that his emotions were tied to something that, apart from politics and ideology, most people would say is bad. I don't care what letter you have next to your name. If you're someone who gets a high, a rush, a, quote, good mood out of that, there might be something wrong with you.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you know, we talked about Trump as a man-child, you know, the baby Trump balloon that was often used to taunt him. It was a fairly accurate description of what his demeanor was during his entire presidency and even now, where you kind of see that sort of demented glee at something that really was rather sick and repugnant that was occurring. I also think it's interesting that we are hearing this from Sarah Matthews. It's very similar to what we heard from Cassidy Hutchinson as well. You know, these are not sort of household names. They're sort of mid-level staffers in the White House. We haven't really heard this from the top officials, I think, for the most part. You know, we're still waiting. We certainly haven't heard any outrage from GOP senators. I mean, why isn't somebody who's considered like sensible, like John Cornyn, saying, hey, this is really terrible. This is ridiculous. This has gone on way too much. We need to stand up against this. So I think it's really interesting the sort of the type of person who's coming forward in this committee and how telling they've been, and also the type of person who's been silent.
And briefly, Che, before I lose you, what are you going to be evaluating in what is the final schedule hearing? What is the point of it all, given that so much of the evidence has now kind of overlapped? Some people would even say, if you want to be skeptical narratively, that, oh, well, we get it. We get the point.
Well, I think that there needs to be sort of a clear final sort of argument that can really be used as sort of an elevator pitch to somebody who didn't watch any of the hearings. Somebody says, oh, I didn't watch any of this hearing. What happened? You should be able, at the conclusion of this, to be able to sort of easily communicate to them what you saw, what you understood about this. I also think that there is a clear narrative that has been laid out, not just about Trump, but about Republicans and Republican governance, the type of malfeasance and mean-spiritedness often that they conduct themselves. You know, it felt to me a lot watching this hearing as Uvalde happened, as the Dobbs decision happened, as that terrible Indiana AG went after that doctor was occurring, that this was all part of one sort of piece. This is the way the Republicans conduct themselves in office. And I think that narrative is sort of something that is worth exploring as well.
Interesting, especially as you draw those connections, and that's all real stuff people are living through. Our thanks to Chaycom Duri. Neil, I want you to stick around as we have this other DOJ story with this new memo leak. Rachel breaking the story last night about how Attorney General